That's a fun trailer, isn't it? Isn't that a fun trailer? Good evening, everybody. Welcome aboard for this, the fourth Q&A session that we've got for Train Sim World 2. Totally nailed the name of the game. I think you'll find. Matt, do some talking for us. Say hello. This is Matt Peddleson, everybody, who is the lead producing senior lead for...
That's exactly what it says as well on my job title.
If you're a little bit... Let me know if he's a bit quiet, and I'll turn him up again. Have we swapped places again? Yeah, we have. Yeah, we like to keep you guessing.
If you know where to look every time, then it's no different.
Exactly. Where's the fun in that? And last time around, we were looking in opposite directions, so I flipped us around a bit. Can we turn up Matt a little bit? Yeah, we can totally do that. There you go. Let's up the tempo on Matt. Regrettably, there's nothing I can do about my own volume apart from moving the microphone closer. So there you go. I shall keep yelling if Matt's too quiet, and I'll turn him up even more, because that's the kind of system that we operate there. Anyway, let's get this show on the road. We've got quite a lot to get through this evening. So where shall I begin? So this is the fourth Q&A that we've done, and so far we've done sort of general questions, and we answered a bunch of those, and then we did what was the second one we did? Sandpatch Grade was the second bunch, where we also talked a lot about preserved collection, and we talked a lot about variable adhesion and quite a few other things. This time around, last time we talked about Colnarchen. It's very hot in here, so if you can hear my fan, I apologise for that, but the alternative is man in white t-shirt keels over on webcam. And so tonight we're talking about the Bakerloo Line, but that's not all. So Bakerloo Line is our main focus, but we're talking about how routes are selected and more besides. Ryoku just asked, is this the final Q&A? No, we're doing at least one more, but we'll also do some gameplay before we launch as well. So we'll do live gameplay for you, so you can ask us to poke things with a stick to see how it's going. Right then, starting off, I want to do a quick recap on preserved collection. It is for those who aren't heavily engaged in the Dovetail forums or the Discord. So if you go even out to Steam, there's people who are a little uncertain of what preserved collection actually is. So I want to just do a clarifying statement so that you kind of understand what it is. This is probably something you already know, so bear with me for a moment. Preserved collection is all the routes, with one exception, from Train Sim World 1, Train Sim World 2020, that are being converted to run under Train Sim World 2. When we mentioned this originally, the intention was only to bring those routes forward, but not to add the bells and whistles from Train Sim World 2 into those routes. But we decided to delay the game for a couple of extra weeks in order to add scenario planner functionality and ensure that variable adhesion is working correctly on those routes. So all routes bar one are being brought forward. So if you've got a collection in Train Sim World 2020, it will work in Train Sim World 2. Yeah, and everything you have in Train Sim World 2020 continues to work. Just, if you never jump into Train Sim World 2, keep playing Train Sim World. That's entirely up to you. We're taking nothing away from you. This is all add. Nothing is take away, it's all add. The one route that is not coming with us is Northeast Corridor. Now, we know that this is quite a popular route, but it has baggage with it. So Northeast Corridor and the associated locos that go with that route are not being preserved. When the game goes on sale, we will ensure that everything we put out publicly makes it abundantly clear that Northeast Corridor and the associated locos are not coming forward. Matt, what is the story behind Northeast Corridor?
So Northeast Corridor was route number 3, I think, that we did, or route number 4, sorry, and that means that the locomotives predominantly that are in there are built using a very old way of doing the locomotives. Now, Sandpatch had exactly the same, but we spent quite a considerable time upgrading those locomotives and making them work better and to the more modern standards. This is how locomotives talk to each other for multiple unit working, how the interconnection of the brake pipes and brake systems works. And beyond technical functionality, there's then how the model is built and how the materials are put on and so on and so forth. The earlier models were quite inefficient, but very inefficient compared to how we do them these days. So all the sandpatch ones have been upgraded. The locomotives in North East Corridor still need that pass, and that's not a trivial amount of work. So that still needs to happen before they can come over, and that's not on the plan at the moment.
So you say that it's not on the plan at the moment. It basically means that there is no plan to bring North East Corridor or the associated locos. Which locos are we talking about there? Trains and locos.
So there's the locos that come with it are the ACS 64 and the GP38-2 in YN3 livery, and then DLCs are the SW1000R switcher along with its cab car, and then there's the GP40-2 freight locomotive that came for the NEC as well.
So we know that people are disappointed by this, and obviously we're aware of that. One of the first questions that I've seen kind of related to this is that, so does that mean that we're going to return to the route in the future? Is there going to be another Amtrak route? Because now Amtrak's a little bit conspicuous in its absence. And I want to cover this with one kind of blanket answer regarding what routes are we planning to do in the future? Because this question came up time and time again in today's question selection, which have all been gathered already. As before, if we spot something in the chat that contributes to what we're talking about, then we'll try and answer it as well. But for the sake of argument, forgotten what I was talking about. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, we won't be talking about routes that are coming in the future, and my camera keeps freezing, which is a little bit of a worry. Because my entire rig crashed the other day when I was streaming, so fingers crossed. If that happens, incidentally, don't go anywhere, we'll come back. If everything breaks, we'll come back after I, hit something with a mallet. So we won't be talking about what routes we have planned in the future, what kinds of routes, anything along those lines. We're talking routes today, and so we want to give you as much detail on that as possible. But we're only talking about our hard and fast rule that we will break one time today. We're going to break it once, and we haven't broken it yet. Is we're only talking about what's in the game, and that's it. We won't be speculating about what's coming in the future. We have a huge list of things that we want to accomplish in the future, but we won't be discussing that today. We'll talk about that once we've actually got a plan in place. And those of you who've already seen that we've mentioned we're going to be releasing a public roadmap, that's where you'll find that information, and we'll be more than happy to talk about what all of that means when the time comes. So let's move on to some actual new stuff, I suppose. Route selection. All right, so we put out a bunch of routes. How do we choose them? What's the process that Dovetail goes through to actually select a route to be made?
It's a very long process. It involves an awful lot of people. So there's probably about 14 or so people in the company who are avid train simmers, rail fans, gamers that have got a special interest in it, or more senior people in the business. And essentially we look at a number of different things. One of the things we look at is all the feedback we get on the forums about the kinds of routes people want to see. Obviously the people in the company have got their own wish list of things they'd like to see. And then we look at anything with licenses that we've been able to secure to see, well, what does that put on the table that wasn't there before. And then what we do is we try and put together little one-page documents or little tiny short PowerPoint presentations of each of the possible routes that we're thinking of making. And then we basically spread them all out on the desk, and we sort of categorize and classify and say what looks more interesting. It doesn't. It's got in all of its characteristics. What you can do with the route, how it will feel. Does it offer anything different to what's been done before? For example, an underground route is something new and fresh. So it's trying to find the new, the interesting, the varied, and also the achievable. Bluntly, it's got to be a project that actually fits in the schedule that we've got to make stuff. So we have to find something which delivers on as many goals as possible. And then it goes through a number of different rounds of refinement, and sometimes we get to a place where we've got a route we really like, but one or more aspects of it doesn't quite fit. So we'll try and, or maybe there's more time actually because something has come out easier in the estimate. So we'll try and extend the route a little bit, or add more detail somewhere, or put another loco in there, or put some more wagons in there. And we'll try and refine that thing so that we make the best use of the time we have available. And then that ends up with the final selection of routes that we're looking at making. And then we start to see what else then will fall out from that. So another thing that we look at is, for example, what other DLC locomotives could be added to add to that route later on in the future.
So, I mean, this one is not on your programmed question schedule there, Matt. So, you know, on your toes. You mentioned a couple of times the amount of time we have available, the amount of resources we have available, because routes, when we're putting together anything, there is a it needs to be done by this date. And that doesn't matter if it's a route, if it's a loco, if it's an update to the game like we've got going on now, brand new game like we've got going on now. Those things, there are lines that are drawn that we have to hit those dates. So it's the reason I'm mentioning this is because I realise now I'm answering my own question here. Is because we're going to refer back to this a little bit later on when we're talking about longer routes. Let's move on to the next one. Is so we only do routes where we can get a license to use the route, the locos, that kind of thing. We don't do unlicensed stuff.
No, we're just looking at well, the goal is that if it needs to be licensed, it must be licensed. If for some reason we found a route that there was nothing on it that needed to be licensed, then that would still be on the table. That's incredibly rare. Can't think of anything about it. Most operators have got a logo somewhere, and so we need to make sure that that's there. And plus, it's also really great if you can get, have a really good relationship with the operators in question. You generally get more help, and which makes the production easier and better.
Okay, so I mean, historically, we've obviously got to focus on doing routes from Germany and the US, and to a lesser extent North America as a whole, and the UK. Is that the only place we go? What is it going to take for us to look further around the world? Why don't we look further around the world?
We actually do. I mean, in every round of route, where the sort of the process I described earlier, there's always routes from other countries put forward into those. We're always looking to see what we can do there. And so some of the areas that are a challenge is all the detail you see in these cabs come from the fact that the team know how a lot of this stuff works. They know how to find out how this stuff works. We have a large number of people that will tell us how this stuff works and provide us with the information we need to help and review it for us. They know how the signaling works. There's a lot of technical detail in understanding how these trains work, which isn't necessarily all particularly obvious when you're driving the game, but the fact that a signal went cycled from one aspect to another versus going off and then on again or something like that. There are unique regional things that change, and these are things that a local enthusiast would be absolutely looking for. This is what makes it a route unique to them, and so we need to find look in all those nooks and crannies and find all the detailed information. It's not just about make a train that looks pretty, put it on a route that looks pretty, make it go. We need to dig into that detail. And then as outside of the technical aspect of the train, there's all of the scenery around as well. If you're running in different parts of Europe, for example, the buildings, the trees are going to be different. You can't really just put all the same tree, put UK trees in different parts of Europe, because it'll look silly. It'll look like you're driving a UK route.
You've got a tree fixation. This is not the first time that you've mentioned trees. Are you an arborealist in your spare time? You haven't got any spare time. You're making a game. Spare time is something you're not allowed.
No, there's no spare time. No, but trees take up. There's such a huge percentage of what you see in so many routes that it's really important that you understand that. I mean, I like to make sure we've got the right, same as our art director is really, whenever he goes on art trips, you end up with lots of photos of bricks because he likes to make sure that the colours and textures, the styles of the bricks. Because again, if you are from that area, then if you put some London bricks on an Austrian route, it's just going to look wrong. to anyone that knows the area. So there's lots of little details like that. So it's digging into all of that stuff, working out what's important. So that's a long way of saying there's an awful lot of stuff beyond just look at some photos of trains and make an image of that train. There's a lot of detail inside there. Would we want to make routes from other places in the world? We are always looking at routes from other places in the world, yes.
So, I mean, you've mentioned before that we've got a wish list of routes that we want to make. What's on that wish list?
All the routes. I mean, we're train fans. It's when we look at the routes that are out there, it's we've got a big long list of things that we want, and a shorter list, but still far too long list of really interesting stuff. Some of which has come from the community in the case of, that's a really interesting, we can bend and twist the idea like this. So we got a lot of stuff that we've looked at in all sorts of countries all over the world, and not just in current stuff, but also historic stuff as well. Because I tend to prefer driving older routes than modern routes. Other people in the group that looks at this stuff are much more into the modern stuff. So we get quite a nice balance as well in terms of UK, the different worldwide interests and both present and historic routes as well.
Okay. So, I mean, we regularly get suggestions come through if we're streaming and stuff like that. We have a suggestions forum that we fire people out to go, if there's a route you really want to see, stick it in there. What impact do those suggestions actually have?
So, quite often, a lot of those suggestions are for some pretty amazing long routes that'd be really, really difficult to try and achieve. But I don't want to dissuade anyone from making those suggestions. Please do keep going. However, what we do, we look at the routes that you're suggesting as part of the process. It is part of that process is to go through that. Sometimes there are some really good ideas in there, and a lot of the time they're actually already on our list. But what that does is it says, we think this is a good idea. We also know the community think this is a good idea. Okay, that bumps it up the list, actually. That makes it more interesting to us to do. But the other thing that we do is, across the broad spectrum of things that everybody's suggesting, there's generally themes and tones that people, for example, someone, you might see actually there's a number of requests coming in for some kind of 70s freight route, for example, in America. And even though 7 of those types of routes have been suggested, and maybe that for whatever reason we can't do any of those specific routes, it does then sit in us, okay, there's a desire for that kind of route. Why don't we try and do that kind of route? So we'll then go and try and find other routes and see what comes into that. So yeah, that's why I don't want to stop anyone or dissuade anyone from making suggestions, because just even the theme of your suggestion, the kinds of trains you want to see, the gameplay you want on the route. Lots of people want, if we see lots of people wanting switching gameplay or shunting gameplay, then that's great. We'll see what we can do to factor that into the other routes that we're looking at as well.
Okay, so I mean, we said that we're going to talk about longer routes. Brace yourself, here we go. Now, obviously with Colnarken, that is a 65-kilometre route. It's not a very long route for a high-speed train. Why is the route not any longer?
So the amount of time a route takes to make is dependent on how much there is on how long the route is in miles, but also how many stations there are and the complexity along the route. So what stops routes getting longer is just purely down to the amount of time that they take to make. And we are trying to do R&D at the moment into coming up with ways that allow us to maintain the level of detail that we're doing, or try to extend in it even, but allow us to push that length out. We've got a very strong desire for pushing the length out. Almost every route proposal we put forward internally is longer than the one we end up making, and we end up finding ways to cut it back to make it fit into the schedules that are in there, and yet retain the essence of what's really interesting in terms of the gameplay for the route. So we're always trying to look for longer routes, and yeah, it's about really just looking into the R&D work that we're doing at the moment to try and enhance the tools.
So, I mean, we see you've frozen incidentally, but we're going to carry on. You've unfrozen again.
I'm unfrozen.
Now, I mean, a lot of the kind of long route discussion is based around pure mileage. When can we see 150 miles of route? Are you saying that it's actually impossible to make a 150-mile route in the amount of time that is allotted to make a route?
With everything the way it stands at the minute, you wouldn't be able to make a 150-mile route and do any justice at all. Obviously, you can, if you make a complete barren wasteland with 150 miles of straight track, that's achievable. But who wants that, honestly? So there's a new level of detail that everybody expects now from Train Sim World and Train Sim World 2, and we want to make sure we keep meeting that expectation, but do what we can to extend the route length by making the processes easier. For the dev team to work on, and adding to the dev team. We've grown the dev team as well. So these are the kinds of steps that we're trying to make. It's really more about the level of detail in the route, how much gameplay there is on the route. There's all sorts of stuff like that. There's complex yards on the route can actually make it to where a route takes as long to make than if it didn't have that complex yard, but was just a 2-track main line. But that complex yard may be actually really important, because that's where trains start and end on that particular part of the route, or it provides different types of gameplay. So it's about trying to find the balance. It really is much more about making sure that routes are interesting and we've got a nice variety of things to do on them.
So what do we define as a longer route then? I mean, is there a mile, kilometre length that dictates this is a long route versus this is a short route?
I think that's a personal decision. I think that everyone has to take, and just there's a route like the Bakerloo Line, which I think is 14 miles. I don't think anyone would consider that a long route. It's probably the route that's taken us the longest to develop in as long as I can remember. So there isn't really a mileage. I'd like to see routes over 100 miles, but that's just a random number plucked out of the air because it happens to be 3 digits. That's not necessarily a good indicator. What's more important is that it's a fun route. A 100-mile route that's not got much to do on it is not interesting. Whereas a shorter route with loads to do on it, Bakerloo 14 miles, 20-something stations, and all sorts of bits of variety on it, is a supremely interesting 14 miles of ride. Whereas, yeah, so it's really about that. That's the most important thing, I think.
Okay, so we've got a question in there. I'm going to skip quite straight past that one because we don't need to answer it, because the next one is the one that people want. So I mean, there is a bit of speculation out there that consoles actually change the amount of stuff that we can stick into a route, and therefore they are to blame for routes not being as long as we'd like to make them. Is that true?
No, it's not true. Please pass on to everybody far and wide. Consoles are not what's causing the route length. It is purely down to you want to make a route with a decent level of detail. It takes time to make it. These things are handcrafted. So no, consoles are not. But when the game is loading, it only actually loads the tiles that are around you. So the fact that there are 500 tiles not loaded or 500,000 tiles not loaded is irrelevant. As long as you've got disk space to store it all, it will just load and unload tiles as you're driving along the route. So no, console has no impact on that whatsoever.
And that's why high speed took some time to develop in the first place, to streamline that tile loading process.
Exactly. It's high speed was a challenge with the consoles, because we needed to optimize how Unreal loaded and unloaded. We also needed to optimize how we dealt with some of these things, and that's what's enabled us to do high speed now, because we can now load and unload significantly faster.
Okay, so what's the actual longest route that Train Sim World 2 could handle? I mean, let's say that the only scenery I want one cactus at the midpoint and then a station at either end. How long can we go here?
We don't know is the answer to that question. So there's no built-in limitation that we're aware of, and because it's just adding more tiles, and there's no limit to the number of tiles that we're aware of. So I'm going to put lots of we're aware of, because we've just not tested this that far. So one thing that I will say is, for those of you that are a little bit more technically aware of how Train Simulator works, the Train Simulator 2020, it uses, so the world is a nice ball, okay? I think we can all agree it's a ball, is that right? Unreal and Train Simulator think it's a flat line, think it's flat. So what happens, you use this thing called a UTM, a Universal Translocator, which converts a ball into a flat thing, and it sort of maps latitude and longitude onto this grid. The easiest way to visualize it is a Terry's chocolate orange. If you imagine a Terry's chocolate orange with all of the segments around it, and then also then cut it around the circumference as well. Each of those little slightly odd, almost square, slightly triangular shapes there is a section of the world that is then bent and malformed to make into an actual square or rectangle. So what it does is it warps the shape of the world. Now in Train Simulator 2020, it uses a single origin point, which means that the further you get from that origin point, the more the lines bend and curve because of the curvature of the Earth. So, but we're talking over a couple of 100 miles. So you can still do really long routes even on Train Simulator 2020 before you start coming into problems. For Train Sim World, when the engineers were originally putting this design together many moons ago, they wanted to try and avoid that limitation. But we couldn't get away from having the UTM translations because we still want to model it according to real latitude and longitude. So we use multiple origins, and it basically will smoothly go from one origin to the next as you travel around. So in theory, you could do something like a United States transcontinental, 3,000 miles. I'm going to caveat that way. We have never tried that, but we have tried to design so that we can R&D for it later on. But it's a pretty flexible platform, and I am convinced as soon as we try and do it, we'll find more problems with that. But it should be a strong platform for us to build on.
Okay, well, I mean, you kind of lost me there at your chocolate orange reference. But I mean, when we boil it down, the question that everybody wants to get the answer to on that front is: so are we getting longer routes in the future, or what? And the straightforward answer is that Train Sim World 2 is the platform off which we can now rebound to do more with. We're not talking about what we're doing in the future, except to say that what we've got with the new platform is a much stronger foundation to do more with. We will have more news for that after the game's out, but right now that's all we can really say about it. The other question that I saw come up that I just want to dispel for a moment: if we started doing longer routes, would we charge a higher price for them? No, we got no plans to do anything along those lines. The only conceivable way that we'd start charging a higher price for stuff is if we put more work into developing them in the first place. It simply comes down to that kind of equation. Now then, extensions, Matt, are routinely mentioned as a way of lengthening routes. So, firstly, what's an extension? Give us a quick definition.
So route extensions are where you take an existing route and you want to do more with that route. So, for example, take London to Reading, and if you want to go from Reading to Bristol. So that would be the Reading to Bristol would be what's being referred to as a route extension.
So it's a part two. So it's an additional piece of DLC that adds a second segment onto a route that you're already familiar with. Yes. Okay, so we've already got this, right? In Train Sim World, we've got Hagen to Finnetrop, and then we've got Wuppertal to Hagen. Why don't we just link them up? What's the difficulty?
So actually making the tracks link together pretty much works technically, internally. In fact, there's been some enterprising people in the community who've actually already done it by merging files together and doing all sorts of clever hackery. So technically, that kind of works, but it doesn't work in a way that's really nice and user-friendly. Signaling doesn't quite work when you merge the routes together. And the bigger issue is, how do you create gameplay on that route? So in a world of Train Sim World 2, you'd need the scenario asset that allows the scenario planner to work, but gives you all the paths across the joint. Service mode, you'd need to have a service mode authored across both routes, so that trains would move between them, and either it would have to be know how to go from one service mode to the other service mode, or you'd want one single service mode that switches bits of itself off if that bit of the route is not available. So these are all achievable problems. We've been thinking about it, and we've got ideas for how to do these things. But it's really the gameplay side of it that's actually probably the more interesting bit that needs looking at. Technically, making the routes join, as the community have proved, kind of works in very simple fashion with issues. It's not perfect, but it's solving the service mode problem and the wider gameplay issue. That's kind of the bigger issue there.
No, I mean there's regularly demand for us, or at least requests. Demand makes it sound like there's bandits at the door with pitchforks. There are regular requests to actually extend some of the more popular routes that we have right now. Why don't we do that then?
So at the moment, it's because Train Sim World is still relatively early days. There's still so many routes and types of routes that we just haven't touched yet. And rather than going back and make an existing hole bigger, to use a phrase, at the moment we're focusing on making new holes and bringing in the new trains and the new operators that aren't in the game yet, rather than going back to an existing route and just doing a bit more with the existing route, because that's cool, and at some point that will become absolutely the right thing to do. But at the moment there are just so much variety and type of trains and places that we haven't been to yet, including other countries, that really we want to try and keep exploring that at the moment.
Okay, so now I'm going to say a word now that's going to trigger a bunch of people into going like, oh, finally they're getting to the point of the stream. So Bakerloo, it wasn't the most frequently suggested underground route. Why have we chosen to do it rather than one of the more popular suggestions?
So we looked at all of the underground routes. We had a very strong desire from the community to do underground.
I know, I did the research.
You did the research, and that's another really strong way to go back to the community, everyone watching here, and say, you know what, it was because you filled in that research. That's one of the main reasons that the Bakerloo Line exists in Train Sim World 2. So we really do listen. What we then went and did is we conducted research on all of the different routes to work out what the signalling was, what the trains do, what the train drivers do, and what the current state of those routes are. And what we found is that a large number of routes these days use a complex signalling system called Saltrack, which we weren't confident we could recreate in the game. Whereas other routes, such as the Bakerloo Line, use a much more traditional absolute block signalling. So that immediately made some of those routes more interesting. And then also a large amount of the underground these days is moving over to ATO, automatic train operation, where the trains drive themselves for the most part, and they're assisted by the driver, which probably isn't the most interesting experience inside the game. So for our first underground route, we wanted something which was technically within reach, bearing in mind that doing an underground route has already got a number of challenges with all these underground areas to sort out, but also then made sure it still delivered a good interactive experience for the player by making it to where they were fully in charge of driving. Yes, on these other routes, you can cut out the automatic train and the driver can therefore drive themselves, but it's not what they normally do, and therefore it felt kind of weird to say, in this game you'll be normally doing what drivers don't normally do. It just felt a bit strange. So we thought we would go with Bakerloo Line first. It's also a nice and short route, albeit with 20-something stations, so it's actually a really, really complicated route to make.
It's 25.
25. I couldn't remember the exact number.
No, it's 25. I know that. You don't. I think it's in the trailer, It might be.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on. Do beg pardon.
So there's 25 stations in there, which actually made up a huge chunk of the dev. So, and if you look at some of the underground routes that are a bit longer, more in line with perhaps some of the route lengths we do in Fury overground routes, the number of stations is astronomical. It's 50, 60, 70 stations, which is an interesting place to try and solve. So that's why we chose Bakerloo. It was a first attempt based on making sure we could deliver a great experience. And we want to see what we really want to hear your feedback to work out what we do next for Underground.
So, just to tie that back to what we were talking about before, you said this is probably the most complicated route you've built, and yet it's the shortest. So is there a correlation then between the number of stations and the complexity a route has?
A number of stations has a big impact. When the environment team are looking at route proposals, they take into account the mileage, and they take into account the number of stations, and the number of stations plays a big role in what's being looked at. There's also then the size and complexity of those stations, because if you've got a Colne station, that's an awful lot of work to make. If it's a a bus shelter on a platform, it's obviously going to be, if there's 25 bus shelters, it's not so much of a problem. But actually, all the London Underground stations are quite comprehensive. They're quite unique, and they all have to be built, and they're quite substantial. So there's actually quite a lot of work in there, and that's kind of where a lot of the time has gone for that.
All right, I'm going to do, the next question is one that I'm going to fold into. We already answered this sort of, and that is, is it possible to extend this route, e.g., going from Bakerloo out to Watford Junction? We're not talking about stuff that's happening in the future, or isn't happening in the future, or might happen in the future. We're only talking about what's coming up for the launch of Train Sim World 2. So we acknowledge the question, but we're not giving you an answer. Sorry. Right, so how did we go about putting this route together then? Did we get a ton of access from Transport for London? What was the research like? How do you go about putting a route together like this? Not like this route. Come on, details.
So there's an awful lot of reference that we've been able to pull together, and obviously it's been a challenging time to go out and get reference. But we've been able to get some reference. Plus, there is it's London Underground. It's massively photographed. So we've been able to get a lot of reference online. We did arrange a couple of reference trips with TfL, where we were able to get photographs and do some sound recordings. But they were relatively limited. Very, very grateful for the access, especially given everything that was going on. And they enabled us to fill in a lot of blanks, and certainly we got a lot of detail for the interiors and the exterior, for example. But we toured the line and took photographs of the line, and then it's speaking to people. We've got one or two people in our beta and subject matter team who are drivers on the London Underground, not necessarily on the Bakerloo Line, but they are drivers, and they can provide a lot of contextual information, because a lot of the processes on one line are similar, and they can, I know what that button does in my train, it does this. So we get an awful lot of detail feedback from people who are very, very generously giving up their time to help us. And I just want to say a big shout out to everybody that on the beta forum for the advice and the guidance that you've been giving us. It's very, very much appreciated. So it's gathering, as with any route, it's gathering from a huge variety of references and resources. There's some really great cab ride videos of the Bakerloo Line specifically, slightly older ones that have been available for quite some time, but there's also some newer ones. There's some driver training videos on YouTube as well for various procedures. So we've been scouring, as we do for every route, for every YouTube video that we can find, to see what can we learn about. That signal is one of the things about signalling team. One of the things they were really keen to do is try and capture the way that the signals all look a bit bolt, and they're a bit sort of jerry-rigged together, because that's how the London Underground. It's I need a signal that's got a green and a red light on it. They won't be standardising. They'll find a signal that's got a green and a red light on it. So we've tried to capture some of that higgledy-piggledy nature of it to give it all a really unique feel as well. So you get a lot of that detail from the videos and the photos that we're able to find.
Okay, that's good. Here's a really easy question that I should have asked first. I put the questions in this order, and the order I have chosen is wrong. Is the Bakerloo Line that we're releasing, is it the entire line, or does it terminate at Queen's Park?
It's the entire line to Harrow and Wealdstone, yeah. So it's Elephant and Castle, including it's the two tracks. There's two tracks in tunnels to the south of Elephant and Castle. It's got London Road sidings, one of the main depot facilities. You've seen that in the trailer. And it's got Stonebridge Park main depot facility. The route goes all the way up then to Harrow and Wealdstone with a turnaround siding, where the trains, they'll go out and then come back in on the other platform when they're heading back in the other way. So I think that's basically, the extent of the line now.
So does it include the Kilburn High Road station? Because I know that's used. I know this because I saw the question come up, and I went and did my research, and after 30 seconds of Wikipedia decided it was a legit question. So it's used occasionally for a bit of overspill train action when you need to get a unit out of the way. Are we making use of the Kilburn High Road station?
We're not. It is not part of the model, no. The Queen's Park, the track then proceeds down to Kilburn Park in the underground. Kilburn Park so Queen's Park is where the line goes underground, and Kilburn Park will then be the first of the underground station. So Kilburn High Road is not included.
Okay, all right, good stuff. And right, let's get back onto the regular. I see. Look, I've thrown us out of whack. Okay, right. Here is the number one question for today's stream. The main line. Yeah, the WCML or the ECML. It's West, whatever, West. CML. I've seen various mention. Everybody's talking about the main line being in use now. Is that occupied by the AI? Can we drive on it ourselves? Can we use it in the scenario planner?
No to all, I'm afraid. So we're modelling the the Bakerloo Line as it's a model of the Bakerloo Line, and that's where the effort has been put in. The West Coast Main Line you can't avoid because it's right there, it's right next to you. However, we don't have any trains that run on the West Coast Main Line in the library, so there's not really anything you can put there. And at the moment, one of the limitations of the scenario planner is that you can't put down AI only paths. So and the area that is on the West Coast Main Line really is not suitable for walking around. You'll probably fall through the floor and all sorts of things. It's not been tested for that. It is scenery. So the West Coast, treat the area of the West Coast Main Line that you see as scenery. This is a Bakerloo Line product, not a West Coast Main Line product.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, is there a complete section that you've got in there? Only I want to know this, so feel free to tell me to push off and get on with the show. Is it a complete section, or is it just, literally just a couple of tracks sat there because that's where they are in the real world?
We've only done what's necessary up and against the Bakerloo Line, which is a few miles. It is a few miles, and includes the huge yard at Willesden, so they're all there. We've hidden them off of the 2D map. One of the bits of feedback that we've had from previous releases is people prefer the 2D map to accurately represent what is usable track. So the West Coast Main Line and Willesden, you don't see them on the 2D map, but if you're at Willesden, you'll see the trains going down to the tracks and the station going down to Richmond are there as well, but you can't use those tracks, and nothing will be using those tracks. But the same is true for when on the West Coast Main Line. You'll see them, signals are there, and they'll be lit up in appropriate colours, but they're not. You won't see trains on them.
Okay. Where can I free roam on this? I mean, free roaming is one of Train Sim World's kind of big deals. Where can I go? Can I wander around stations? Can I dive down a tunnel? I mean, where can I go off on my own, on foot, and get into trouble?
So above ground, you can do anything you like. Same rules, the same fenced off areas as we normally do. So we fence off the areas around stations to stop you getting into areas that will get you stuck, and to keep you in the main area. But that is similar to the experience you've had previously. Basically, it's the area generally up to the track fence. Once you get it, and similarly for stations, there's over bridges and so forth, so that you can cross between platforms, and those bridges or hallways and things have been modelled as well. Once you get into the underground, you can't walk in tunnels. And the reason for that is there is just nowhere to go. The tunnel is only a little bit bigger than the train, and if you were walking down the tunnel, nothing good is going to happen with that. Bad things are going to happen. So we've disabled walking through the tunnels to stop anyone getting into trouble with that. But obviously you can drive the train where you like, following the services and the scenarios in the underground section.
So, I mean, it's unusual for us to lock off a section of track that you can't walk down. My understanding was it just wasn't fun, or there was no point to it because you're walking down a effectively black hole.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's when you're walking, the tunnels are quite long. They're incredibly dark, even with the torch on, which only shines 6 inches in front of your face. So it would be, it would be incredibly unfun, to be honest.
Okay, all right, fine. Here's another random question. It's an easy one, because I don't know what this is. I've got a suspicion I know what it is. It's a piece of maintenance hardware. Does the Bakerloo route include the track monitor train?
No, the only train that's included is the 1972 stock.
Okay. What about gaps in the third rail? We've done that on other stuff before, so...
Yeah, we've done gaps in the third rail, and we tried to, as far as we can, get the gapping roughly equivalent to where it would be in reality. And certainly it was more prevalent around junctions, but the gaps because the power rails are not. They don't like have long continuous power rails. They'll gap those the different sections of them. So you'll find those in there as well.
Now, in screens that we've released, in screenshots that we've released previously, I think the video is safe from this. But we've shown the destination boards on the front of the train using both the two-line style and the current one-line approach to showing the destinations that it's going to. Are both included? What? Sorry.
Yep. It's literally the screen that's just come up right now.
Oh, it's the timing.
It's the one that's on the screen. This is the one that's actually included. If I remember correctly, all the photo reference coincidentally that was used to make the train was actually, as it turns out, the older version, which is why the model got that. And then the early feedback we got from the beta forum when they started playing with it was it doesn't look like that anymore. It's single line now. So we changed it over to use the single line approach, which does look nice, so it fits better.
Right. So the wrong version crept in there, and then we've since corrected it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fine. What am I up to next? All right. Now then, we've spoken about this before. Will the trains spark and make pyrotechnics as they judder around? It's kind of an iconic thing for underground trains to do.
From any electric train, even, but certainly the underground ones. So no, they don't do that. It's a technical artist's job to set up all the lighting and to make it trigger at the right times. And that team have been fully engaged on the lighting. I know everyone's had a lot of feedback for us on the screenshots and things we posted about the lighting. So that team have been really, really heavily trying to improve the way that the lighting of the underground sections looks. And I think everyone would be happy that was how the time's spent.
So, I mean, based on today's trailer, I've seen some feedback on the way the lighting is in even the trailer today. Is that how the lighting looks if I were to go and play it today?
No. So this is one of these things where the work is carrying on constantly, even as close. So the footage for that trailer, I think, was recorded 2 weeks ago. It takes quite a long time to go from just clipping footage to having a trailer released and agreed with all the licenses and so forth, so that it lags behind the way that the game looks. Now, normally that wouldn't be noticeable as much, but in this case, the art team and the environment team have spent an awful lot of time focused on this lighting issue, and there were changes to it as soon as yesterday on that lighting. So and it's I think they've nailed it. Well, I guess. Well, I'll hear your feedback when you see more in the gameplay videos when we do a gameplay session. But I think it looks considerably better now than it has done previously.
Right. Right. Like I don't know. We're charging ahead here. Now I've got a bit of bonus. You've done me some bonus videos here that we can throw in at a random point. And because there's not a good question, I've been scouting ahead, and there isn't good questions to put these against, other than the last one. I just see I'm in two minds as to whether to stick one in now or not. Let's do a couple more, and then we'll do a bit of video.
Yeah.
How are speed limit systems implemented? Do we have speed control signals? Do we have draw up signals, speed control, train stops, all of that kind of stuff, and more besides? Because it's a complicated beast down there.
No, we don't. None of those are implemented. They were all investigated to be implemented, and actually some of the core systems have started to be implemented for them, but they weren't able to make it. So, for example, this is the speed control systems. The way I understand it is that certainly on the 3 aspect, if you're going too fast, it'll hold the aspect until you go slower, and there's a tripcock there that will stop the train if you're going too fast at certain points. So they're modelled, so the tripcocks and ramps are modelled, but they don't animate. And if you run a red light, then standard running a red light things happen where the game ends. But no, those three specific questions there, the answer to those is no.
Okay, so I mean, the effect is going to be the same, but it doesn't do it in a fully simulated fashion. If that's
it's close. The speed control system is something that'll be slightly different. So the 3 aspects just work as standard 3 aspect signals in a simulation, rather than the way they would for speed control signals. But it'd still be familiar and easily understandable in terms of how you drive it.
Okay. Right, good. Let's go on to safety systems. So, I mean, as well as speed control, there's always safety options kicking around. What have we got safety-wise? And, more importantly, to some people anyway, do you get more points for playing with safety systems enabled?
Safety systems on the 72 stock, there isn't really much there except for the dead man's handle, which is implemented. And if you release the dead man's handle and then reapply it, there's then an audible warning system, which sounds like the brakes are releasing. It's like a big air system. It's not a horn or a bell or anything. It's just this air evacuating rapidly in the cab. And then there's a button you have to press in order to reset that.
How do you replicate a dead man's handle on a keyboard or a controller? I mean, how do you do that? Do I have to keep a button pressed down the entire time? How does that work?
No, we make it so that if there are certain lever positions where we'll pop the handle up, where it's generally it wouldn't actually cause the train to brake. When you're in an active power position, we'll push it down and we'll hold it down. You can then click it and release it if you want to cause yourself problems. We've got a separate button which will raise and lower the dead man's handle. It's kind of a break the train button, so whether you press it is up to you. But normally, whether it's pressed or released is done automatically. You just can override it if you want to.
Okay, fine. And do I get more points for playing with this enabled?
No, that's not something we have in the game.
Okay. What braking systems have we got?
So
brakes are important. It's not just a case of stop and go. Come on, what do we got? Because there's multiple braking systems.
Yeah, there's so you've got the rheostatic electric brake, which is the one that you will normally be using with multiple steps, and then there's also a backup Westinghouse air brake. There is a fuse in the back wall where you can disable the EP brake, the electro-pneumatic brake, which means that you then have to stop with the Westinghouse brake. So if you want to give yourself a bit of extra fun, then you can disable, knock the fuse out for the EP brake and try and drive and achieve the same schedule with the Westinghouse brake, because it's braked very differently than how you would brake it with the much more simple to use EP brakes. But the default, you'll be using the EP brakes.
What we have done here is we have stumbled upon a section where it's a good time to throw in a bit of video. So earlier on today, you recorded for me a section of cockpit look around of cab. That's what they call them. Yeah, that's the thing. A bit of glancing around the cab. Now, what are we looking at here? This is going to loop. So take your time and detail everything.
What I just operated there was there's a safety system on the underground train, on this train, where you can't lower the window and still take power in the train unless you isolate there's a cut-off there. If you bring the window down, you will not be able to take power in the train. If you flick that cutout switch, as I did, then you can then take power in the train. So there was the other thing was over in the top left corner there was a rate switch. So if you're in bad weather, you can switch it to rate 2 or rate 1 so that the train takes more time to take on power.
Before you continue, I saw a comment that says, I can see the scenery flickering. Now, presumably, this isn't a final that we've got going on here. As you can probably see in the top corner, the lighting still needs baking on quite a lot of things for this particular video.
Yeah, this is my dev build running locally, literally in the editor, so that I could record some of the stuff and give you some of the latest stuff that was from there. So yeah, this is not production build at all.
Okay, fine. Sorry, carry on with your tour. I just wanted to make sure people didn't think that this was, what they were going to be tinkering with.
No. So looking down there again, you've got the drop light interlock, which is again the same thing I'm using on that I just mentioned over there. There's a number of different buttons and switches. You've got door interlocks, and another train arriving over there. We're just at Queen's Park at the moment. So in the video, this is the destination board, the roller blind for the destination board, so you can choose that where you want it to be. And then that will just reflect what happens on the outside. There is also in the bottom right, you can't quite see it at the moment, there's a 3-digit display, Those you can't set those. The service mode will set those, or the scenario will set those for you.
Right. So that's designed by the route that you're running. The path.
It's the train number.
The path that you're running.
It's the train number. So train number 207 will do numerous things during the day,
but
it will always show up as train 207. Yeah, you can follow that. So just trying to see, what am I looking at?
Have you lost yourself there, Matt?
This is it. We're back at the beginning again. So just another quick round there. So you've got the control switch there, which is you put the key in and turn it on. That turns the train on. Then you've got your door switches. This is the drop light interlock for the window. So now I can safely open the window. Or unsafely open the window, actually. That's the cab light switch. People like buttons and switches that don't do anything. So
I do. Love it.
Heater in.
More the merrier.
It adds to the role-playing elements. So there's this is the rate switch that you use to change how the train, the sort of performance physics of the train. There's then various resets. This is the audible warning valve, the one I was just on there. It's just a little button on the lower of the 3 black buttons. The one right at the bottom there is the wipers. You can see you've not got much in the way of gauges and dials either. There's the brake gauge, and you've got the which is for the air brakes, and you've got the speedometer, and that's it. So it's not a lot to play with. This is your lights, cab lights, and so on and so forth. The 4 big switches in the middle control passenger interior lighting and so forth. The brake test over here, if I could have remembered how you did it, I would have done it in the video, but that works. You can do the brake test properly as well. Then you've got, so if you want to reverse the train, this is interesting. If you want to reverse the train, you have to use this reverser interlock, this reverser cutout. So by default, if you just put the train in reverse and apply power, it will not go anywhere. So you need to, before you put it in reverse, apply the reverse cutout, then put it in reverse, and then it will let you back the train up. Because basically, reversing an underground train is a bad idea for many, many reasons. So don't do it. So they put that reverser interlock. Now, you and I probably want to have our own reasons for why we think it's a good idea to do it at a time. So the interlock, the cutout, which is completely realistic, is there to allow you to do that.
So, and that's realistic, right?
Yep, it is.
Okay. All right. Good. Right. All right. I'll leave this to do one more lap, and we'll move on to the next one. Just purely because it makes a change from looking at us with scrolling screenshots behind us. So you're not going to see anything fresh in there, but completely enjoy the repeat experience. Well, I do have to. Where am I up to? Right now, in the video today that came out in the trailer, we saw mirrors at the end of the platform that appeared to be working. Is this some kind of jiggery-pokery that we've done to make it look like the mirrors are working and they're not, or are the mirrors genuinely working?
It's a half and half answer to that. The kind of are working and the kind of not. It uses a technique in Unreal called screen space reflections, which costs basically nothing from your performance of your machine, but it gives you most of the benefit of it. So it's called, it's 80% of the benefit with basically no cost at all in terms of frame rate. So you get a mirror which you can walk up to and it will look that. But I think if a train is in there, then unless you happen to be looking at it the right way, then you won't necessarily see the train in the reflection. Although if you look at it in the right way, it will show up. Because of how screen space reflections work, it's difficult to explain. But they are faked, but they are less faked than you might think. And it's done that way to make it look good, but not hurt your performance. Actual mirrors would hurt your performance.
So it's not faked in the video, that's how it looks in the game, right?
Oh, that's how it looks in the game, totally, yeah.
So it's not a true reflection, but it is sort of.
Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a non-technical way of describing it. People seem to think that we're now just pushing the same buttons repeatedly, haven't latched on to the fact that it's a looping video. So I'm going to bring us back on the screen, because at least then when you freeze frame, it looks like the whole thing's broken, which is a benefit to all of us. Talk to
you
me
also
about
in that question mentioned
cameras.
Sorry, in that last thing you talked about clocks. Yes, there are clocks.
Yeah.
There are digital clocks set up as they are in the real one. They're there, and they'll set to the right times as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, good. I mean, presumably doing the clock actually isn't that difficult, is it?
No, but it was something that one other team made a special effort to get in, and so I wanted to call it out.
All right, fair enough. No, yeah, fair play. External cameras. Now then, how do they? Because I've used cameras extensively. I spend most of my time using external cameras, and every time I collide with anything at all, the camera goes flipping haywire or it stops entirely. How does that work? Because in a tunnel, there's no room for that kind of behaviour.
No, it just doesn't work. The external cameras just don't work at all in the tunnels. So for the Bakerloo line, we have disabled external cameras once you actually get into the underground section. Above ground, it works the same as you're already familiar with it. But once you get into the tunnel section, then the external camera functionality is disabled. Once you get into a station, then pressing an external camera button will actually put you into a head-out camera, so that you can then look up and down the platform length and check when you're opening and closing doors easily. But traditional fly the camera around functionality is not there once you're in the underground section.
Okay, all right. No, that's all good. Let's get into the nitty gritty. Everybody likes a count. How many scenarios have we got on this route?
5 scenarios and 1 tutorial.
And what are those scenarios? Are they all kick off from Elephant and Castle and head down the line, except this time it's morning? Or is there a little bit more to it than that?
No, it's been the 5 scenarios have been done, and the 5 scenarios follow on from the training session. It's meant to be more of a follow-on day in the life type thing. So one scenario, you'll start off in London Road Depot, and you'll proceed out of London Road Depot, which is quite interesting because there's several points where you have to stop and go, where you stop, and when you stop, then the light will change, and then you'll proceed a bit further on, and then just before you join the main line proper, you have to stop and then carry on. And then you'll drive that to a point up to Queen's Park. I think it's London Road to Queen's Park first. The next scenario is then Queen's Park change ends up to Harrow, drive change ends back to Queen's Park. And then there's 2 or 3 scenarios where you drive the full length of the line, and then the final scenario you're putting it back into the depot, if I remember rightly. So it's meant to feel like a bit of a sequence.
Okay, so this is the kind of the day in the life notion that we've sort of talked about previously.
Yeah.
Okay, nice one. And presumably all of this is compatible with the scenario planner.
Yes.
Well, the scenarios you just described aren't, but you could quite easily come up with your own that is, along those lines.
Oh yeah, but the paths in Scenario Planner include the sidings and so you can create a path, which, for example, in Scenario Planner, which starts at the siding south of Elephant and Castle and run into one of the sidings at Queen's Park. Or you can then choose a bit of it. If you only want to do Elephant to Queen's and not the sidings, you can do that as well. So we've tried to extend the paths to allow you to use depots and sidings as well.
All right, now I want a straightforward one word, or at least a 3-digit number. How many timetable services are there on the route? How many are we putting in there for the launch of the game?
It's around 200. I don't have the exact number.
Okay. How many should it be if it were realistic?
Oh, a lot more than that. A lot more than that. The timetable. So there's another timetable in progress, which has 451.
But that won't be ready for launch.
That's not ready for launch. So the one that's in there is around 200, and has 9 trains active on it. So essentially, what we found in doing this route is, because it's all self-contained. This is actually putting the West Somerset route to one side. This route is the first time we've done a fully self-contained route, and that's highlighted a number of areas where we need to improve the dispatcher and the service mode creation capabilities. And so we're aiming now to get some of those deficiencies resolved or improve those, the way that we handle that, which will then enable us to go back to the enhanced Bakerloo service mode, and that one's got 20 trains delivering 450 services on that one. But as it ships, it's around 200 services.
But if I'm an enterprising player, presumably I could go and put my own exact timetable, accurate scenario planner route version together.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to start a train at Elephant and Castle at a particular time and then have a bunch of AI trains coming in the other direction, or other trains in front of you holding you up, you absolutely can do that, totally. The scenario planner gives you the freedom to create whatever gameplay you want to see.
So if we talk realism versus what's being delivered here, realistically I think if you were to stand on Oxford Circus station, you'd get a train along about once every 3 minutes, something like that.
In reality, it's about
Yeah.
once every 3 minutes.
So with the 200 services that we're running, what would the gap be?
In the order of 10 minutes or so.
Okay. And so when you've completed the 400 upgrade, let's say, then what will we be looking at?
It's a glad point that's closer to 5. It varies throughout the day,
Right.
and depending on how the service is, sometimes they get a bit bunched up together. In which case the gaps are 2 or 3 minutes or 3 minutes, and sometimes they're slightly longer. But on average, it seems to be around 5 minutes.
Right. And so why is this? And we had this conversation earlier, and I really liked your answer. Why is I don't know, someone else might find the answer interesting. Everyone might go, yeah, whatever. But why is it that we can't just do more services? Why can't we just plumb the timetable in and off we trot?
So timetables, the complexity with timetables is that you have to manage the entire life cycle of the train. The trains never just pop in, pop out. Take a route like Colnacken, for example, there's portals at either end, and trains pop into existence, drive through the rain, and pop out again. In some cases, they'll change direction at Uckham, but they're still then popping out into a portal. So you never really have to manage the full life cycle of a train in a route like Colnacken. On a route like Bakerloo, where everything is self-contained, every moment of that train's existence has to be managed throughout the 24-hour period of the day. And so it came out of the depot and did all these moves. And so you can't just say, right, go up, go down, go up, go down, go up, go down, and then do that copy paste a bunch of times, because then everything just tries to run over the top of each other, and you end up with all sorts of problems. So you then have to coordinate the moves. At Elephant and Castle, you've got so trains going southbound. Once they hit Lambeth North, the next station is Elephant and Castle, and they'll actually split out into platforms 4 and platform 3. So that you can actually get double the capacity into that one that you would in any other station. So that's done dynamically in reality. So they work out which one's the next free platform, and they'll send you into that free platform. Queen's Park, where trains turn around. So the services that run Elephant to Queen's Park, just the underground section essentially. And at Queen's Park, they'll then proceed north into the sheds, which is in the service modes, both service modes. And you'll then change ends, and then you'll come back into Queen's Park and head south. But there's 2 sidings again there as well, so they'll choose which one of those to go into. There's more then going on at Stonebridge Park, and then of course you've got to make sure that everything stays moving. You can't have anything hanging around for any amount of time. So if a train gets to Harrow and Wealdstone turnaround siding and is sat there for any more than a bare minimum amount of time, it's now holding the network up, which means that everything then starts having problems behind it. So you tweak that, and then all of these things then move on from it. So as it becomes an evolving, living process of trying to recreate the timetables, and recreating it to an exact working timetable when it's that many services is actually incredibly time-consuming and difficult. And sometimes it's easier to create a representation of it. In other cases, we can copy the full timetable. So Cornacken is copied from the full timetable because it's a more manageable size. But the Bakerloo working timetable is enormous. And so that's kind of it's making service mode, particularly in a self-contained environment like this. It's incredibly fun. It's really rewarding, but it's also very, very difficult.
Okay. Well, I mean, I look forward to the upgrade, let's say, because it needs to feel busy, and on the subject of busy. In fact, let's do sound first, right? Because the Bakerloo line it's loud. Bakerloo line trains are properly noisy. Not so much the electric motive, although certainly that's pretty loud too. But there are clangs and flipping sparky noise of flanges hitting this and that. You go over a junction and all of that kind. Is it? I mean, are we going to feel like we're driving some kind of monorail, or does the world come to life through the sound?
I mean, there's so much screeching. We've been wondering at some point in the dev if we needed to provide an option to turn the screeching down, which we haven't. You can enjoy it in its full realism. So particularly as you go around sharp corners, you'll find there's all sorts of wheel flange squeal going on there. And similarly, the other thing that's this struck me as well while I've been playing and testing, is when you see trains coming in perhaps in the other direction, and you hear them clattering over junctions, and it just sounds absolutely spot on. It's because they're relatively light, these things, so they feel a bit more like, it's a lighter clunking sound rather than the heavy thud you get with the bigger locos. Which is so yeah, it definitely feels as I remember it from the last time I was down there.
Okay, so it should feel, I mean, audibly, it should sell that we're there. Because, I mean, audio is something that gets brought up on a regular basis. About, because it comes down to authenticity. If you're playing a sim of some description, you want to feel like it's the real deal. So, all right, well, I mean, once we've got gameplay going on, people will be able to judge for themselves. And just to reiterate, before the game releases, we will do a gameplay session on every one of the routes, and we'll let the chat call the shots as much as we can, because obviously if the chat goes bananas, then you can only call some of the shots. But we'll make sure that you get a chance to sort of simulated poke it around before you get a chance to actually buy it. The other big one, particularly popular in the chat this evening, passenger announcements. Now, that's my calling card. That's what I do. I do passenger announcements. That's my thing. Are passenger announcements included either on the platform or in the train itself? Our next station stop is whatever?
No, they're not. That's not something we have in the game.
Okay. Right. Well, there you go. That's the answer. No. And it's because we don't have a system for doing passenger announcements.
No, that's not something we have.
When we do have a system for doing passenger announcements, you get passenger announcements, but we don't have it. So there you go. On the subject of passengers, there's not many of them, are there? Well, I mean, one of the things that the London Underground is famed for is there's too many flipping people on it. Now, in the screenshots and the video we've seen today, we've seen people standing up inside their carriage. Yep. Is that real?
We have that as well. So we have one of the things we wanted when we were looking at how the passengers would work, how the seats would work, is we specifically wanted to make sure that they were slots that were standing slots as well as the normal seated ones as well. So we have so you will see people standing, which does make the carriages feel a bit more busy than if there was just people seated. That would feel very empty, I think.
Right.
So there are definitely people standing up. One of the challenges that we need to think about there is that is making sure that the player can still navigate. If the train was actually fully full, you wouldn't be able to walk through the train. So there's a number of factors to consider there. But no, the trains do feel relatively busy, if only because of the fact that people are standing up as well.
Yeah, but you say relatively busy, but even then, you'd see that train roll in with that many passengers, and you kind of go like, is there something I'm not aware of? This is a wonderful day to ride the Underground. There's just not enough people there, Matt. There's just not enough people.
There isn't enough people.
And this comes on to kind of passengers in Train Sim World and moving forward into Train Sim World 2 as well. And I said when we started today, I was going to break the rule of we're not talking about stuff that's coming, but in the next months, maybe extending to a year, our major project is, or one of the major projects, is to completely overhaul passengers. We want greater diversity in the range of passengers that are available. We don't know what this means yet, but if you stand on any platform waiting for a train, everyone's looking at their phone. So, people should be looking at phones. People should be wearing earphones. Far greater range of people in the first place. It is a major project that we're going to be undertaking because, again, it speaks to authenticity. And this should also, people wearing masks, yeah, why not? And that's a major piece of work that we've already committed to working on, and it will be featured in the roadmap when that comes out. I keep hyping the roadmap. I'm very nervous it's not going to live up to expectations, but it only fails to live up to expectations if we don't deliver the stuff we write on it. So whatever we write on it, we better deliver it. Otherwise, people are going to be very cross at me, mostly. So yeah, we know that passengers, as they are right now, one, there's not enough variety between the individual passengers. Two, there aren't enough passengers. This is something that is a known. This is no mystery. This is not a surprise. And to help sell the world and make it feel like it's a living, breathing entity, that's something that we want to address. So expect more information on that in the future. But no, you've got the same old passengers that you're used to for the launch of TSW2. Right. Where else are we going here? Right. Okay. So coming on to our last question for today. The video and a couple of screenshots have shown working passenger information screens. We just made that up because in the first one of these Q&As we said it wasn't coming. So it is now coming. Yes? Shall I show some... I'll bang on some video, shall I?
Some video
I'm going to bang on the nicer one. We got one of these. And yeah, let's just deal with that. So this is a fully active 43 minutes for that. Oh, come on, man. So passenger information screens were not in the original spec for this game.
No,
they were the wrong side of the line, and frequently we have stuff that is just the wrong side of the what can be achieved line. And actually, when we pushed the game back an extra couple of weeks to help get preserved content in, preserved collection, I should say, it freed up a team who just kind of went, we're going to do passenger information screens.
Yep.
And there is one. It's doing its thing. It's doing the scrolling business. I've got another one of these videos, you know. Well, you should know. You sent it to me.
Yeah. There is a train coming. I'm not quite sure why it hasn't got the minute counter on that one. So I'm going to flag that up to the team tomorrow. But essentially, just to back up what this is showing is those timings are from the actual timetable. So if it's saying 42 minutes, that means that there is a train in 42 minutes according to the schedule. So that's actually, if you were standing on the platform, you would see a train around about that time. And then once it finishes, it would then cycle on and tell you when the next train is going.
So if I'm driving the train and I've accidentally triggered the emergency brake at the previous station, and therefore I've delayed not only my train but everybody else behind me, does this information screen update accordingly?
No, this information screen is based on the timetable. So if you're running late, then it will be out of sync with this.
So it's not dynamically driven.
No, it doesn't. It's not tracking where your train is in terms of its approach. It's looking at, according to the schedule, a train is due at X time. Therefore, that's what it's showing on there.
Right.
This is a system that we may improve and evolve as time goes on, but this was the best thing that we could get in the time we had.
I've seen a good comment there, actually. In fact, two of them. Why did no one get off? No one got off the train.
Dev build.
Hashtag dev build. Yeah. Okay. All right.
It's going to be my get out clause for anything.
It's going to be your get out clause for everything, right up until the point that we play it live on stream.
At that point, it's very different. But no, this is a dev build that was literally finished building about 3 minutes before I started recording the videos, which was about 20 minutes before we started the stream.
Yeah, I know. This was very, very last minute stuff. Let's flip over to the other one because we've got another one here as well. Let's just make sure that's muted because you were recording me at the same time then. So here's another one doing its business, and
so you can see on the right hand side there it's got terminating here showing up. So these will be Elephant to Queen's Park, and then on the left hand side this is a train coming in. It's due in 1 minute, and you can see it also lists out the stops, and again that's all coming from the timetable dynamically as well, along with the other stuff, the sort of the following on trains as well, and it just cycles showing different panels of information.
So the inevitable question has showed up. So if this is on the Bakerloo Line, are we also going to get it at Cologne, for example? So are we now implementing passenger information screens on everything we've got previously?
At launch of the TSW2, this is not in the Cologne, it's only in the Bakerloo.
Right, but presumably now that we've done the tech, I mean, do we have to redo it every time that we have anywhere that might have information screens, or does that mean that it is actually pretty easy to implement in other places?
No, it's pretty actually. Now we've got the tech. I mean, it's almost boiled down to being an art problem now of creating the appropriate assets, the way they look. and then a little bit of setup to make them show the right screens and so forth. But the tech is now in, and our aim is to use it going forwards.
Okay, all right, good stuff. Right, have I missed anything? I don't think I have. I think we got through it all. Again. You've got nothing. You've got nothing more to say. I've worn you down. I've worn you out. So that's all we're going to cover off for today. We've got a. It's kind of a catch-all Q&A that will be the next one that we do, and I don't think it's actually waiting for a trailer this time round. That's nice. Oh, maybe it will. Maybe we'll have some kind of grandiose extra trailer action going on in there. What I will do, however, is I'll put up the Q&A threads for the next Q&A section, which is what have we missed? What haven't we talked about? It would do you a favour if you looked at all the Qs we'd already A'd, but I'm not gonna throw anybody out a window for asking something that's already been asked. But we will also be detailing the livery designer, and we will be showing off gameplay live, at which point Matt is no longer able to hide behind it's a dev build, and therefore things do get wonky. We'll play off what we call a production build, which is the one that ends up in your hands. So thanks very much for tuning in today. As normal, we're going to finish off with the trailer. But thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you next time. Say goodbye, Matthew.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you didn't say goodbye, though, did you?
Goodbye.
No.